Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us for today's PICS Trust Architecture Education Series webinar, UNTP Time to Hit Go. PICS Global started the trust architecture community because the challenges around traceability, trusted data exchange, interoperability, and transparency are much bigger than any one company, technology platform, or even a single protocol. A major piece of the digital traceability puzzle is starting to fall into place. And look, communities, industries, and ecosystems need people who can help connect business, policy, and technology to turn that momentum into real-world progress. We call those people trust architects. And this community is about sharing what we're learning in this space, helping people recognize where momentum is building, supporting trust architects as they activate communities and industries, and we're also building open source tools and implementation capability around this ecosystem as it matures. If you'd like to stay connected after today's session, the best thing to do first is to sign up for the PICS Pulse newsletter. You can see that URL on the screen, and I'll drop the link into the chat as well. Now, what prompted today's webinar is that UNTP 0.7 is out for final public review, which means it's nearing its final form as a global UNC-FACT data exchange standard. I'd like to introduce PICS Global CEO Zachary Zeus to talk about what kind of momentum 0.7 signals, what changed in the latest release and why it matters, where the opportunities are emerging, and why we believe it's time to hit go on UNTP and community activation. Over to you, Zach.
Thanks, Rochelle, and welcome everyone. As Rochelle said, I almost don't need to present because she's done such a good introduction. But this webinar is UNTP 0.7, and it means that it's time to hit go. And the way we're going to structure today's discussion is we're going to start with 0.7 and what it means from a commercial and business perspective. I do have one slide that goes into quite a lot of detail on the technical changes, and I'm only going to put that up quickly to give folks a sense of what has matured about UNTP and the infrastructure that's underneath it. And then we're going to talk about community activation and how to take UNTP and the momentum that's building as a result of us heading towards 1.0 and activate communities. And from there, we'll kind of wrap up and open the discussion for dialogue. And so the way we run our webinars is about 20 minutes of presentation. It might be a little bit more today. We'll see how we go. And then the back half of the conversation is open discussion. All right, so what does 0.7 being open for public review actually mean? So it sounds a little bit, well, it is a bit technical. And so the core thing is that the protocol has been through quite a lot of review, discussion, debate, dialogue, and trial out in the real world. And as a result, it's been improving and refining. And we think as in the UNTP working groups that it is ready for production. And so this final public review is the final public discussion before it goes to 1.0 and it goes into regular maintenance mode. And we think it's stable enough to build upon. So that means that the pre-production pilots can get started so that people can be ready to roll it out in anger in the coming weeks and months. And it really is the kind of last chance before it goes live for public review, and that feedback can directly influence the standard. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that have been made and what prompted them in the real world projects that we've been working on over the last 12 months. And so the window is opening and the reason we think it's time to hit go is because, and most of you on the call know these things, but the regulatory wave is here. There's been a lot of kind of regulations developing over the last few years, but it's starting to become real and implementations are starting to really need high quality interoperability and upstream data in their supply chain. Things like the EU battery regulation, the EU deforestation regulation, CBAM, CSDDD, UFL, APA, mandatory climate disclosures, and many more. These are not future laws. These are things that are coming into effect as we speak. The ecosystem globally is aligning. Major players are converging around UNTP, and we're starting to see the real early signs of the network effect beginning. And the reason we see this is because if everybody does it differently, that just increases costs for every implementer. We've done some work over the last 12 months with some of the biggest companies in the world. And even they recognize that they need an ecosystem solution to interoperability and traceability and information upstream. They can't solve it on their own, even though they have have significant resources to solve this type of challenge. I was in a session with a major auto manufacturer, and they said that two levels up, or two or three levels up from their business, they had about 35,000 suppliers, and that some of their supply chains went 13 or 14 levels deep, and with a large number of business in between them. Microsoft has stated that they have 45 million businesses in their upstream supply chain. And so what folks are starting to realize is that having a consistent core gives the ability to answer this question multiple times. From a UNTP perspective, or from a UNCFAC perspective, the governance is locked in. Rec 49 passed last July. So that is the policy instrument that UNTP sits under. That was ratified by the UN plenary, and with no objections. And we're starting to see strong collaborations across many international organizations. A lot of them a little bit confidential at the minute, but we're just seeing increasing momentum and increasing collaboration. And all of these forces are converging at once, and this is what we start to think about in terms of a tipping point. And it's good that we're getting to 1.0 as we go. So in terms of 0.7 and what's changed, not the specification detail, that's on the next slide. But basically 0.5 to 0.6, those were when we were laying the foundations. We had all the major things defined in those as we went through that. But we started to run real world trials, real world experiments, real world implementations, and we learned a lot. And that's what's reflected in the 0.7 release. And now the house is really ready to be built. All the pieces are there. All the components are about right. But the public review is the last chance before we're going to be building this in production. And so public review closes on July 13th. And that's the version industries and businesses and governance are going to build on. And so what 0.7 really is that version that is ready to go and we anticipate only minor tweaks as we go to 1.0. And early versions gave us the language of trust for interoperability and data exchange, and 0.7 makes that architecture robust. And you don't need to wait for 1.0 because we do think this is a release candidate and it's ready to go. Now, there will be changes as we go from 0.7 to 1.0, but they will be minor, or we anticipate they'll be minor. You never know what you're going to get in a public review, but we do anticipate they're going to be minor because we're relatively confident in the state of the protocol as it sits today. Now, a little bit of detail, and just to kind of give you a sense of what's changed. So from a terminology perspective, we changed from a sustainability vocabulary catalog to a conformity vocabulary catalog because what we realized is that the claims in the data that people are sharing across supply chains were not just sustainability claims. They were more broadly conformity claims. So they could be claims about the tensile strength of steel or claims about the quality of the meat that was being delivered in a red meat project. And so it wasn't just sustainability claims, it was also product conformity claims and quality claims that were being added. And we cleaned up some of the language. So We've removed the word digital from in front of all of the different credentials that we're issuing. So it's a conformity credential, not a digital conformity credential. It's um, a product passport, not a digital product passport. So we're simplifying the language and removing redundancy. We flattened the data models, and really that means that we made it simpler for um, extenders and implementers to use the core data model and map that to their needs, while also seeing how those map to the individual data artifacts that are part of UNTP. Um, and we cleaned up some of the linking between data sets. Access control, we made a simpler SIC name pattern access control. We updated the identity resolver framework. We expanded the DID methods for verifiable credentials. And one of the key things that's happened, and I'm not going to talk too much about it on this webinar. We'll have another one in a couple of months that we'll kind of bring forward, which is the identity anchor has been strengthened. The other thing we've done is we've separated out a new project called the Global Trust Registry Project. And that project is really designed to build the concept of trust anchors much more strongly. And this core idea here is that the organizations that are the root of trust are anchors for the data that we all use. And so the idea is this is similar to the way passports are managed. And the way that passports work is that when you go to a smart gate, the gate checks the chip on the passport, and that chip is signed by a national government. So it's signed by DFAT in Australia, or yeah, I think that's it. Well, anyway, the federal government in Australia or the federal government in the U.S. And that key is actually hosted by an organization called ICAO. And so GRID follows that same pattern, or the Global Trust Registry follows that same pattern. And that's what we're finding is that there's a number of projects that are starting to spin out of UNTP for a wider range of use cases. And so the Global Trust Registry is one because we think it's an important capability that goes beyond UNTP. And then another project that spun out of UNTP in kind of a similar time frame is VTD, which is verifiable trade documents. So it's expanding, it's using the same flattened UNTP data model, UNTP core data model, for not just product passports and facility records and conformity credentials, but also for trade documents, things like waybills and invoices and cargo bills of lading. Those types of things are all in scope for the verifiable trade document. But it builds on the same core that this builds on. So the data mapping, if you build on UNTP, the data mapping is the same. We'll do a webinar on that in a couple of months. The key idea here is that trust architecture is the work between the standard and the protocol. So from UNTP 0.7 to the outcome that organizations and businesses need. And the way we imagine that is that trust architecture is the coalescence of the business value of having interoperable, traceable, verifiable information with the rationale to do it, the policy and standards and regulatory requirements and the social license, with the technology that makes that work. And so we view trust architecture as the coalescence of those three things. And the way that a trust architect brings those together is through for UNTP is through the community activation programs. And the community activation programs are really how communities can come together to address or to solve this problem. Because one of the challenges that people face is that the value realization is much better if I'm a business implementing a interoperability protocol. The value, it's much more valuable if my customer actually wants the data in that interoperable way. And so we see that bringing UNTP together, or communities together is the best pathway for adoption of UNTP. And so the community activation program is the formal way that's been defined to do that. And the community activation programs are member or industry organization led. It's coordinated community adoption, and it reuses 4 continuously verified registers. I'll talk more about that as we get into the details of this. And each entry carries cryptographically verified conformity assurance, or so that you know that you're working with verified organizations who've gone through the process. And the community activation program typically goes through 5 phases: inception, discovery, and then alpha, beta, and live is kind of the go live side. And so what we recommend folks to do as they're thinking about engaging in this ecosystem is to kick off a community activation program, but just kick off the inception phase. Define the business value, identify the catalysts, define the business case, bring your community together to do that. And the folks to bring together in a community activation program are buyers and sellers, conformity assessment bodies, software providers, registry operators, all the folks that make up a UNTP ecosystem, but bring the communities of people who are interested in doing that. And so some of the active community activation programs around the world, these are kind of the very big ones, but they're all kind of leading sort of industry level ones, and then working with smaller or more regional or more defined communities to build that out. And in fact, one of the things that we're seeing is a move towards smaller communities building these out in their own interest. And I mentioned this a moment ago, but I just want to highlight that even the biggest companies in the world, the big tech companies, recognize that they can't do this alone, that they need a community activation approach because it's not possible for a single organization to solve this, because they need the complexity of supply chains are so large that without an interoperability approach, we'll never be able to answer the questions that are being demanded by the regulatory changes that are coming. And so the 4 things that need to be in place for community activation to succeed, I did kind of talk about this a little bit: a catalyst for change, engaged buyers, committed suppliers, and a funding mechanism. And we think those are the key things to, as you're building out a community activation program, the key things to get in place through the inception process. And the next thing is, and I did get a question just yesterday, is what questions should be asked, or what is the form that needs to be filled in? And so this is what we suggest trust architects should look for when they're looking to build a community activation program. So industry guidelines implying interoperability. And so the idea there is, if there's something in the global marketplace that's saying, hey, we need an interoperability solution, one of the key things there is the CSDDD in Europe, which says if you're going to put products into the European market, you need to have supply chain due diligence of any claims you make about the products you bring into the marketplace, and you need to know that the claims are true. And so you need upstream data from all of your suppliers, and that implies getting the data from somewhere, and an interoperability framework is one of those. One of the things we hear from, particularly from businesses who work upstream, so folks like primary producers, miners, even folks who are in sort of the raw materials processing world, is they get requests from lots of different upstream downstream buyers, people that don't even have direct commercial relationships, asking for data in lots of different formats. And so that's a catalyst for change. People complaining about how complicated and how hard sustainability reporting, or even general reporting, is another sort of signal that this is a time to bring things together. people looking for not just data, but trusted data or verified data is a really important signal for needing this kind of a solution. We also see that if there are cross-industry working groups forming, they are probably looking for a solution that has this kind of a shape. And then procurement and market access pressures. We talked about CSDDD, but there's CBAM and EUDR. And then other things are fast movers needing ecosystem participation. So we are seeing in the marketplace some organizations moving faster than others, but those organizations not wanting to go it alone, so they're pushing their communities to come forward. And a community activation program is how to activate that. An association saying, our members don't know where to start. Everyone is solving this alone. The landscape is fragmented. This is asking for help. And this is exactly what the trust architecture community is built for. So UNTP provides the standard, the spec, the 4 registers, the governance and working groups, the collaboration forum, the global UN guidance and institutional backing, and the formal community activation program methodology and toolkit. But what the trust architecture community adds is the business policy and technology framework. So a protocol is one thing, but how you make it real in a business needs a business case. It needs a understanding of the value proposition of meeting the social license needs. It needs the technical implementation details. And we also, the PICS Trust Architecture community also provides open source tools and implementation support, like-minded people to learn and build with, our newsletter, which allows you to stay connected to the ecosystem, and sector activation expertise and project support. And so the trust architecture community is not competing with UNTP. The community is how people learn how to plug UNTP into their communities. And so it's the community to activate your community is kind of the way we're talking about it. And so I know I've said community a couple of different times here, and I'm using it 2 distinct ways here. And I think it's probably worthwhile for me to pull that apart a little bit. And so there's the trust architect community, which is what we think needs to exist to support the millions of businesses that need to implement interoperability solutions globally. And the community activations program speaks to communities or industry groups or sector groups that have a shared challenge that they want to solve. And so the classic example that we use for a community that activated to solve a shared problem that we're all relatively familiar with is the champagne industry in France. And so that community got together and they trademarked the word champagne, and they made legal. Well, they basically made sure that the only people who could use that word on their product were people who were from the Champagne region of France and who met the requirements of that community. And so that kind of community is the kind of community that we think can be activated using a UNTP community activation program, and is the type of community that we think trust architects should be looking for to support and to help implement this kind of capability. And so where are the opportunities? So at the top are sort of the community activation programs. And so we have kind of different industry groups or sector groups up at the top there. But those are actually kind of global. There's also regional industry groups. So in Australia, there's the Cotton Research Development Corporation. There's the Meat and Livestock Australia serves the livestock sector. So there's both global versions of these and regional versions of these as well. And what each individual community activation program brings together are the implementation components of a community activation. And so at that level, it's the software providers, the identity registers. The ones we typically point to are GS1 for retail-focused products. So when you go to the supermarket and you scan the barcode, that's a GS1 identifier. Or in Australia, the National Livestock Identification Scheme is every cow has a RFID tag in their ear. They don't have a barcode, for example. They have an RFID tag, and that's another identity register. And then conformity schemes and credential schemes are kind of the two others. And conformity schemes are the third-party attestations about a product, and the credential schemes are the modifications to the product to meet a specific need. So if we're talking about structural steel, we might have a steel credential schema that meets their specific needs. And so you don't have to wait. You can join the Trust Architect community. We've talked a little bit about that. You can submit feedback on 0.7. The public review closes on the 13th of July, 2026. Every page on the UNTP site has a hyperlink that will launch an email that includes all the details to make that easy for you to see. And you can start a conversation. So that's what the PICS community is for, and we're looking forward to talking to all of you there. And so the Trust Architect community is where good is good business. The window is open. The time to hit go is now. And with that, I'm going to open it up for discussion.
Okay, well, I will just encourage everybody who is interested in progressing even specific discussions, check out chat.pix.io as a way to communicate with the community, with the Trust Architecture community, with PICS. And also watch out for that webinar that's coming up in June, because we will be getting into more of the community activation building, and really kind of calling up those lessons that Zach and the PICS team have learned over the past while in attempting to do this with a couple of different projects.
Thanks, Rochelle. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have a good night.